Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Joni Johnston. Welcome to my new project, which is to really discuss with you in between our Unmasking a Murder episodes about some of the psychological issues that we covered in a previous episode. I thought it would be helpful for us to talk about whether it's prevention strategies, whether it's how to cope with something that's happened, whether it's how to recognize a dangerous situation. And so I want to talk with you today about cults. Our last episode of Unmasking a Murderer was about Mother Anna Young. She was a religious cult leader who flourished in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and she is currently in a Florida jail awaiting trial for murder of a child who lived there. I'm also sure many of you have watched or read about NXIVM, which has been described as a destructive self-improvement cult that was really psychologically and physically abusive to many of its members. And really some horrible things happened there, including some women were branded with the leader's initials. Some of the women were forced to starve themselves so they would be, quote, sexually appealing to the leader, Keith Raniere. Some of the women were made to give up nude or compromising photos, and they were threatened with blackmail. So this was a very, very disturbing situation. And not only is this a scary story, but it's hard, I think, for most people to wrap their head around how a famous celebrity like actress Allison Mack, who is actively involved in NXIVM and recently pled guilty, or a billionaire heiress who co-founded this movement, could be persuaded to commit crimes for someone who is clearly a narcissistic charlatan. But perhaps the most frequent question I get about cults is, how could anyone get sucked in? Or to put it bluntly, what's wrong with these people? That just about sums up the most popular question that I get. And I'm here to tell you that for the vast majority of people who join a cult, there is nothing wrong with them, at least before they get involved. There is no personality profile of a cult follower. As a matter of fact, research shows us that 2/3 of cult members are psychologically healthy people who come from normal families. And the rest are likely to have experienced psychological symptoms in response to a tough situation they've had over the past year. So, for example, they might be feeling anxious or depressed over a relationship breakup or a move or a death in the family or some kind of career problem. Only 5 to 6% of cult members have major psychological problems before they join a cult. But what many do share is what I'll call situational vulnerability. Cults train their members to be on the lookout for people who have recently relocated, who are going through a tough time. And it is these people who are often targeted. And I think this is important to realize for two reasons. First of all, any of us could be vulnerable given the right circumstances. And second, we are going to be more likely to help our friend or family member if we think of that person as someone who has fallen in love with the wrong person, or in this case, a group, than if we think of them as somebody who has suddenly kind of gone crazy. Now, I know there are some listeners out there, and you're shaking your head no, and you're thinking there is no way you would ever fall for some cult leader's pitch. And I am not going to argue with you. But I will tell you this. One of social psychology's greatest discoveries has been the overwhelming influence that the environment, the immediate situation, exerts on people's behavior. Yet, in spite of the overwhelming evidence that we have to back this up, most of us will continue to attribute a person's actions to his or her personality rather than the situation. As a matter of fact, this is such a persistent and predictable bias that it has its own special psychological name. It's called the fundamental attribution the fundamental attribution error. And for those of you who don't believe me still, please check out the movie, The Stanford Prison Experiment. I think it might open your eyes. It's really a good movie, a dark movie, but it has some very interesting points in it. So getting back to our topic about cults, what can you do if somebody that you care about is involved in what you suspect is a dangerous cult? There are 3 golden rules to follow. Number 1, keep the lines of communication open. Number 2, avoid any judgment or criticism to that person. And I know this can be incredibly hard to do, especially when you're worried about somebody and you see them acting like a different person. But here is the truth. You are not going to talk somebody out of a cult. And if it's truly a cult, they will have prepared your loved one for your panic and your attempts to woo them away, or they will tell them ahead of time that your family or your friends is not going to understand the enlightenment that you're seeking. They're going to sabotage your spiritual journey. And so when you begin to do that, when you begin to criticize them or question them, they're going to be thinking, okay, my leader is right. This is what they prepared me for, and this is right. So again, whatever you do, do not criticize that person or criticize that person's religious beliefs. And number 3, arm yourself with knowledge. So let's break this down into some specific do's and don'ts. We'll talk a little bit about the don'ts first, because those are the hard ones to avoid. The first one is don't use the word cult. Now, I used it, of course, here because it's something that is a term we're all familiar with, and we all tend to think of it in terms of something that's damaging and controlling and destructive. But I will tell you, nobody thinks they've joined a cult. And so if you use the word cult, that person feels criticized and that you are challenging their newfound spiritual path. Don't call that person a fanatic. Don't throw around psychiatric terms like this person's a psychopath or a narcissist. And again, believe me, I know how hard it is to avoid saying these things, but it is only going to make things harder for you. If your loved one or your friend is in a cult, again, that cult is looking for any reason to encourage that person to cut off contact with you, and you don't want to give them any ammunition to do so. The other thing is to make sure that you remind them of their pre-cult life. And here's what I mean by that. You're not going to love that person out of a cult, but you can remind this person that, you have a life, or you had a life outside of this group. So talk about other family members. Aunt Sue's birthday party is next week, and I know she'd love for you to come to her celebration. Or talk about friends. Hey, I saw your old sorority sister at the grocery store, and she said to tell you she misses you. So any time or any opportunity you have to remind that person of their pre-cult life, take advantage of it. Spend time with that person without mentioning the group or questioning their beliefs. I cannot say that often enough. Communicate however you can. Email, send letters, send text. Again, do whatever you can to keep in contact with that person, because the more contact that he or she has with the outside world, the better it's going to be for that person, and the easier it will be when they're ready to leave. Do's: learn as much as you can about cults and how they work. Research the cult that your friend or loved one is involved in. If you can, talk to ex-members of that cult. They can often give you a world of insight into what that person is going through. Locate other friends and parents of cult members. Not only can they provide helpful advice and contacts, but they can give you support. And if you are truly concerned about somebody and think this person is in a cult and in danger, you need that support. When you are with your loved one, when you have the chance to be with this person, be curious as opposed to being critical. So try to understand what attracted them to the group and what they believe they're getting out of it. Again, you don't have to agree, but be curious, because again, the more that you know about where they're coming from and what they're thinking, the easier it will be for you when they get to the point where hopefully they find the courage to begin questioning some of the things that they've been taught. If you ever feel like the time is right, you can also say to this person, I suspect you're not happy. I will always be your friend, your parent, your sibling, whatever the relationship is. You can come to me about anything at any time. Again, then when that person is ready, they already know I have somebody that I can turn to. Now, these are just a few strategies to get you started if you're worried about somebody that you love. I'm putting together a free ebook about damaging cults and about how you as a friend or family member can help that person. If you'd like a copy, please subscribe to our channel and I'll send it to you as soon as I finish it, which hopefully will be pretty soon. But it is important. The bottom line is, again, you can't love somebody out of a cult, but you can make sure they are loved by someone outside of it. And you can make sure they know that you will love them, that you love them now and that you will love them after they leave. Remember, a river cuts through rock not because of its power, but because of its persistence.